You know, it's said that video games are a luxury item, that they don't matter, that they aren't as important as things like, say, world hunger. Yet when I talk about things like how game consoles, including the very small game consoles, have things like conflict materials in them, materials that come from slave mines like the Congo, and so on and so forth. And no, this isn't me just spinning off liberal rhetoric. Nintendo has admitted it and is actually trying to use as little possible in the new Wii U as possible. But that's just it, you see. It's not just that games and gaming accessories start to leach into other areas of social uh, situations, such as sexism, inclusion, equality, racism, conflict materials, slave labor in places like Foxconn in China, which I keep being assured is a necessary evil, to which I say, screw you, no. But now we're coming to an apex. This is one that I've been talking about, and this one isn't going to touch so much on social issues, so this is going to be a small break from protocol. But this needs to be said. There's an article called from Kotaku called "Weapons of Mass Disruption," which is one of their controversial topics they tend to do, and it says how and why consoles will die. And for the longest time, I thought, no, it's not going to happen. You know, as long as we've got creative geniuses like Hideo Kojima programming almost exclusively for consoles, there's no way. But even Hideo has jumped ship. And you know whose fault it is? It's these game companies' faults. Some of you may recall, I am in the midst of saving up for a Wii U Deluxe because, as I've said, there is absolutely no sane and rational reason outside of budgetary concerns to buy the Wii U Basic. Because when you factor in the fact that Nintendo Land itself is $50, you're paying at least $350 for an inferior Wii U when compared to the $350 that you would spend to get an all-in-one package, well, mostly all-in-one, storage options aside, with the Wii U Deluxe. That's why I'm not wasting my time with the Basic, even though I really swore to myself I wouldn't waste my time with the Wii U in general because it suffers from some of the same problems that had me taking my PS Vita, which hardware-wise, PS Vita is sound. But between the proprietary memory baloney and all the other hoops I've had to jump through, being a legally unmodded paying customer of Sony's, I just lost it. I absolutely lost it. And so I cashed it in and ended up getting at least between its memory units and the cards and the games that I had for it, I got at least half the money I needed for a Wii U Deluxe. But if this is the newer business practices, then even the big N cannot stand up to this. I could see maybe one, maybe two systems after this, and then I could see them going to digital only because eventually, I'm not the only one who's going to be trumpeting how much this industry has fallen. And it has fallen. And it needs to crash. Because crashes bring a reorganization. Yes, it costs jobs, but I've already talked about how we pick and choose when we use the "but it costs jobs" argument, and rarely is it ever brought in on the side of gaming. But here's the thing. Gaming has grown out of itself. It has become overblown, over-budgeted, over-bloated with all sorts of things that gaming need not have. That I am now one of the few who are chanting for its death because I want its rebirth. Can you imagine if the original Nintendo had to have always-on internet? And yes, internet did exist back then. In fact, Atari had a dial-up game rental system for the 2600 back in the day. That's how old internet is, and at least dial-up is. But could you imagine if the original Nintendo had to have an always-on connection? You had to it had to download patches for Super Mario World. Day one patches, meaning parents who don't have the internet we have today, not knowing that Mario is going to need a hefty update on a very, very slow connection. Let's hope Aunt Trudy doesn't call in the middle of that download. Do you think we would have tolerated gaming this long if this was the kind of stuff that we had to deal with back then? And yet, this is what we have to deal with now. Would you have liked the Nintendo if it came with no games, one controller, and you had to charge the controller separately? And oh yeah, if you wanted to save game saves after a certain amount of games, you had to plug in some sort of, futuristic sounding, save device. Or no, you had to buy a hard drive accessory, a floppy drive accessory, so that you could constantly put floppy disks into it to write onto the floppies for extra memory. And that's before we even get into the glorious 8-bit DLC packs. And there'll be a lot of DLC packs. Did you pre-order your Mario Kart game or your Super Mario game for your Nintendo Entertainment System? No? Well, too bad. You missed out on all the wonderful DLC that all the more well-to-do kids are getting. But let's look at Nintendo. They're saying that their sales are not bad for the Wii U, despite the fact that the Wii U, compared to the Wii that I used to sell, the Wii that even 2 years, even 3 years out, you could not get your hands on a Wii around Christmas time. And yet, here I was going to GameStop to trade in my stuff because I'd had it with Sony and I had finished off with all my fun with Sony. And I found they had at least 3 Wii U Deluxes, and I couldn't even count how many Wii U Basics. And Nintendo's saying the Deluxe keeps selling out in most areas because that's what consumers want. That's because hopefully some of them have been smart like me and realize the economics of buying the Basic does not make the Basic worth it. Hell, I could pretty much afford the Basic unit right now, sans game. I have no interest in lowballing myself like that. I have no interest in basically screwing myself out of that. Oh boy. But that's the point. Everything's becoming about money. Who can we screw over to make this system cheaper? Who can we destroy? But anyways, let me get into the article scantly, because obviously I've ranted on for too long. You factor in the fact that the consoles are constantly being updated but created at a loss, and that most of their sales come when they've done a secondary price cut, which means that the systems just aren't profitable. I can put you in contact with some Sega associates that will tell you how awesome it is when your hardware no longer becomes even remotely profitable. You then go to digital only. You then go to focusing on game making only, which, to be honest with you, if Big N and Microsoft and all them went to that, that would be the best move ever, because they need to focus on games. I'm sick and tired of reading about developers who are complaining, rightfully so in this case, that graphics matter over gameplay mechanics, whether it actually works, whether it can actually be finished. Everything has to be super high-def HD 3D 2.0 to go out the door, or it's not considered a good product. And that's not entirely the industry's fault, but the fact that they continue to push for that instead of good games. That's why Nintendo thrives for the most part, but again, I cannot see them pulling another Wii U like they have. Having more disastrous launches where they show they've learned nothing from their other failed launches with other hardware, and get away with it. Here's my ultimate solution that everybody keeps shitting on. But if you want consoles around, they're gonna have to change. You'd say, oh well, they can't make an all-in-one console because where's the competition? Mobile for one thing, and PCs for another. That's two major competitions that are taking a major bite out of their bottom line that they cannot afford to not compete against. So they have competition, and they're making shittier machines, if you'll excuse my language. They're making, they have competition, and they're resting on their laurels because they are practically one conglomerate when you think about it. Think about the quality of games today. Yes, there are some great and functional games, but that's dealing with a ever-mounting pile of absolute crap pushed out the door games that don't function half the time, at least not without a day one patch, if that. It's ridiculous. The kind of things that they're expecting us to pay for, and I'm not paying for it anymore. Once I get my Wii U, I am satisfied. I am done with consoles. But here's the thing. Nintendo and Microsoft know nothing about networking. They suck. Yes, I'm saying that I hate Xbox Live and all that it stands for. PlayStation, on the other hand, I have rarely, if ever, had a problem with connectivity, with multiplayer, and so on and so forth, and it's free. So, networking goes to Sony. Media, Sony. I'm sorry, Microsoft, that your HD DVD thing didn't work out so well. Suck it up and do Blu-ray, because I'm sorry those of you who complain and whine, or your James Rolfe who thinks he knows a lot about movies, but here's a little secret, he doesn't really. Blu-ray rocks. My old DVDs look phenomenal, and the fact that they look phenomenal, unless I really need it in high def, I don't have to buy it in high def. So, and I enjoy it. Like, I've got The Dark Knight Returns in high def, and I love it. Oh, God, do I love that. So, media drive has to go to Sony. But storage device has to go Microsoft. It's easy to install and uninstall the hard drives. Transfers are easy. Rarely, if ever, are you going to get a warning that the content on your hard drive won't transfer over. Whereas with Sony, you can get a newer drive, but only up to a certain amount of terabytes. And even then, terabytes. No, gigabytes. Excuse me, gigabytes. And even then, there's no guarantee that half of your information or game saves will transfer, making it a moot point to change that out. At least with Microsoft, I can upgrade it very easily. But the fact that the networking is built into the PlayStation 3 and works swimmingly, definitely networking still goes to Sony. So we got 2 for Sony, 1 for Microsoft. And beyond that, games would be divided amongst them all. They would be sharing the cost. 3 ways of making the Wonder console. And developing kits has to go to Microsoft. They are hands down the best dev kits in consoles, hands down. I have a number of devs who sing the praises of Microsoft's dev kits because they're easy to use, whereas Microsoft's Sony's is the worst. Nintendo's coming in at a close second on that. So Microsoft would take care of part of the dev kits for the all-in-one system. You would have game developers who could focus on one other system outside of mobile and outside of PC. And if you made it slightly scalable, like a hybrid PC, you could then have ones where the devs aren't complaining that the new all-in-one console is creatively limiting, which I've already burst that myth, but I digress. And then consoles could thrive, because I like how some of the devs make games work on the Xbox versus the PS3 version, and so on and so forth.